It's been interesting to watch the reactions, or perhaps non reactions, from the US imperialists to the victory that the Bolivian proletariat attained last fall. Mike Pompeo was visibly disappointed when he was giving his address towards the electoral victory that Bolivia's Movement for Socialism, or MAS, had last October. He was clearly disappointed to see how this illegitimate anti democratic regime he had helped install in Bolivia was voted out by the power of the indigenous masses of the proletariat within Bolivia. And since then, it's clear that the imperialists have tried to lay low for the most part when it comes to Bolivia. They've vilified the Cuban, Venezuelan, Chinese, so on governments, but not so much the Bolivian government. I think because what they did in Bolivia gave them quite a lot of baggage. It was clear that the Organization of American States had lied to justify the ouster of Evo Morales, and it was undeniable that the coup regime of Janine Áñez had abused human rights. It was clear that they had massacred indigenous protesters. So, to make themselves more inconspicuous, they declined to start vilifying the new MAS government when that government came to power, at least for a few months. But then, in this last month, Human Rights Watch, USA Today, New York Times, all the usual suspects in the game of US imperialist propaganda started coming out vilifying the MAS once again. Human Rights Watch came out with a pretty ridiculous argument about how the MAS had somehow violated human rights by granting legal immunity to the people who had helped rebel against the Áñez regime, which is it's pretty ridiculous because all that the MAS did was undo the persecution that was carried out against these people who were fighting for their lives and for their people in the face of imperialist aggression. And of course, the New York Times and USA Today vilified the MAS for arresting Janine Áñez. They quoted some U.S. imperialist lackeys who were saying this is not justice. Janine Áñez didn't deserve this. it was so absurd because their argument was basically, don't you think you're being a little harsh on Janine Áñez for massacring indigenous peaceful protesters? This is the kind of construed, out of nowhere propaganda that the MAS is having to deal with, and no doubt that it's going to have to continue to deal with for the foreseeable future, because the imperialists are evidently going to start jumping on anything they can. Anything the MAS does, they're going to vilify it. They're going to vilify it with the ultimate purpose of manufacturing consent for a new coup attempt in Bolivia. And there's where it gets really interesting because there are some hints that we know of ongoing U.S. imperialist machinations within Bolivia when it comes to planning for a new coup attempt. We know that back in October, some outrageous emails were leaked, which showed that a bunch of U.S. mercenaries, I think it was hundreds of U.S. mercenaries, were engaged in a contract to infiltrate Bolivian society, blend in for some long-term operation of ambiguous intent. We're going to have to see as these months continue to pass what their contract entails, whether they're actually going to try to pull something, whether they're actually going to try to violently overthrow the MAS government. But even if they do, it's clear, first of all, that the imperialists have screwed themselves narratively in Bolivia to a certain extent. The OAS was caught lying, and the last time a coup of this type happened in Bolivia, it resulted in the negation of democracy for a full year and in egregious human rights abuses. And second of all, the proletarian movement within Bolivia is very strong. They were strong enough to overcome this militarized, brutal coup regime which had supplanted itself. They were able, even initially, to seize large amounts of rural territory within Bolivia away from the coup regime, and ultimately they were able to force the hand of Áñez to allow for new elections so that they could get back into gear of developing towards socialism. So, whatever the imperialists do next in Bolivia, they're going to be fighting an uphill battle.